things about me? Because I will tase her if necessary.
Uh-oh.
I have the taser. We haven't had to use it in a long time.
I'm thirsty. Today my special guest is the executive producer of The Amanda Show, Dan Schneider.
Dan Schneider, the so-called Nickelodeon genius behind your favorite childhood shows, is back in the spotlight, and not for anything good.
Hey, Dan Schneider. I know you're watching my Vine. Do you like my Vine? Vine. Look what you've done to me.
For years, rumors have swirled about his weird and unsettling behavior around young stars. But now, the floodgates have burst open.
It certainly has bad parts. I mean, there's a lot of it happens. I worked with an incredibly emotionally producer.
Former child actors, industry insiders, everyone is speaking out. And what they're saying, it's creepier than anyone imagined. So how did he go from being the king of kids' TV to one of Hollywood's most exposed figures? Let's break it down. Dan Schneider was a big name in kids' TV, but his story has a lot of twists. Back in the 80s, he was an actor, popping up in movies and TV shows. Eventually, he switched things up and got into writing, landing a gig at Nickelodeon on All That, a show a lot of us grew up watching. It was a hit, no doubt. But when its popularity started fading, he moved on and created The Amanda Show, working super closely with Amanda Bynes. And yeah, that's where things start getting sketchy. Dan went on to create a bunch of other shows for Nickelodeon, basically shaping kids' TV for years. But looking back, it probably wasn't the best idea to have him around so many young actors. There are a ton of disturbing stories from people who were there, which might explain why Nickelodeon finally cut ties with him. On March 26, 2018, Nickelodeon officially let go of Schneider and his production company, Schneider's Bakery. They played it off as a mutual decision, even handing him a $7 million goodbye check. But let's be real, this wasn't just about bad ratings. Around that time, the #MeToo movement was in full swing, and companies were being held accountable for all the shady stuff they let slide for years. Nickelodeon can say what they want, but it's pretty obvious they just didn't want the backlash that came with keeping him around.
It was wrong that I ever put anybody in that position. It was the wrong thing to do.
So let's get into why Dan Schneider is so problematic, starting with one of his business partners, Brian Peck. This guy played a huge role in helping Dan get away with a lot of shady stuff. Dan and Brian used to run these so-called camp events in Hollywood, where they would recruit kids for TV roles. Basically, it was like an audition disguised as a fun hangout, where kids had to prove they were worthy of being on a show. Sounds innocent enough, right? But here's where it gets disturbing. Parents would drop off their kids, leaving them alone with guys like Dan. And according to an anonymous source, these kids were encouraged to hang out by the pool in revealing outfits to catch the attention of big shot producers.
Actually wrote the words we're saying to each other right now.
Yes, I wrote this whole conversation that we're having right here.
But here's the thing. When you're a kid who dreams of being famous and you hear that stars like Hilary Duff or Megan Fox got their breakthrough events like these, of course, you're going to want to go. Parents thinking they were giving their kids a shot at stardom unknowingly put them in horrible, degrading situations. That's exactly how young actors like Amanda Bynes got caught up with people like Dan Schneider, because their parents were just trying to help them make it big without realizing what was really going on behind the scenes. And if you think this is just speculation, think again. There's actual audio out there from someone who attended one of these camp events, and what they had to say is downright chilling. The whole thing is beyond disgusting. Just the idea that these grown men were handpicking kids at these so-called camp events is sickening. And let's not forget, Brian Peck actually got caught. This guy worked on The Amanda Show as a dialogue coach, and he ended up serving 16 months in prison for what he did to one of the kids on the show. They never revealed who it was, but whether it was Amanda Bynes or someone else, it's horrifying to think about. But here's the worst part. After getting out of prison, this guy somehow landed a job working on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody for Disney Channel. Like, how does that even happen? How do you let a guy with a record like that work on another kid's show? It just goes to show that these big networks don't actually care about protecting kids. There are some seriously shady people running things at the top. Now let's talk about the weird stuff Dan did on his shows. Take Victorious, for example. Victoria Justice was super successful on Nickelodeon, and the show ran for 4 seasons with 57 episodes. A lot of people know Victorious because of Ariana Grande, too. While there isn't a ton of evidence about what Dan may have done to Victoria Justice personally, there are some really unsettling moments. Like Dan once tweeted, "Would you like to see Victoria Justice pour ketchup all over her feet?" Well, here you go. And yes, the video is just as weird as it sounds. The fact that he was hyping this up to kids, making it seem like something fun and exciting, is beyond creepy. And this isn't just a one-time thing. If you look at his shows, there's a really disturbing pattern. He was always way too fixated on young girls. And for some reason, he had this bizarre obsession with feet. Ariana Grande, who played Kat Valentine on Victorious and later Sam and Cat, was put in some seriously inappropriate situations on screen. There were clips of her doing random things that were just weird. Like one time, she was squeezing a potato in a way that was obviously meant to look suggestive. And then there were all the foot-related scenes. Ariana licking her toes, putting them in her mouth, pouring stuff on them. It's gross. And when you start looking at how often this kind of thing popped up in Dan's shows, it's impossible to ignore.
Have you ever tried to get your whole big toe in your mouth? Check this out.
There's definitely more to unpack here, but it's clear that Dan Schneider's shows weren't just about goofy kids' comedy. There was something much darker going on behind the scenes.
Sometimes I wonder if you can get juice from a potato.
The whole thing with Ariana Grande's character was just unsettling. She was made to act super childlike with that exaggerated baby voice and overly innocent persona, while at the same time being put in these really weird situations on screen. And then you add in Dan Schneider's creepy obsession with feet, and it's just straight up disturbing. Obviously, none of this is Ariana's fault. She was a kid just doing what she was told. But looking back, it's pretty clear that Dan was using these shows to push his own twisted fantasies. And the fact that Nickelodeon let this go on for so long, that just makes it even worse. He wasn't just making kids' TV, he was putting young actors in gross and humiliating situations to entertain himself and whoever else was watching behind the scenes.
Oh man, my uvula got stuck between that hamster's toes. See?
It's not confirmed whether Ariana personally went through anything with Dan, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. The way she acted around him in certain clips is definitely off. Like, you can literally see her whole mood shift when he's around. That kind of reaction speaks volumes. It's like the energy in the room just drops when he walks in, and that's not normal.
That was one of the better things I've ever heard.
Hey!
Hi, what's going on here?
You didn't cut out that part.
Why are you sitting on the floor of the set?
A lot of people believe that Sam and Cat was basically a gift from Dan to Ariana and Jeanette, almost like a twisted reward for what they endured on their previous shows. And considering all the stuff Jeanette has implied about her time at Nickelodeon, that theory doesn't seem far-fetched. The whole thing with the Sam and Cat Twitter account asking kids to write on the bottom of their feet and post pictures? That's beyond weird. Like, what kind of children's show would even think to ask that? And knowing Dan's track record with this kind of thing, it feels like he was just using the platform to fuel his own disturbing interests. As for Jeanette, she's been very careful about what she says publicly, but you can tell she went through something really traumatizing. She legally can't talk about certain things, which says a lot, but even without words, the way she's hinted at her experiences and the way Dan constantly fixated on her, like his tweets about her feet, is just gross.
I'm becoming shorter and shorter by the week.
You know what? I think everybody's getting tired of your attitude.
She's even made cryptic videos in the past that seem to reference what she went through. And when you connect all the dots, the tweets, the behind-the-scenes stories, the weird on-screen moments, it just paints a really dark picture.
Hey, Dan Schneider. I know you're watching my Vine. Do you like my Vine? Vine. Look what you've done to me.
Those Vine videos from Jeanette were really concerning. The one where she looks like a wreck and seems to be referencing something Dan did. It's eerie. And then the one where she has bruises all over her body, it raises so many questions.
Working on a sitcom. Bruise. Maybe it's just because I'm anemic. Yeah.
Obviously, we can't say for sure if the bruises were from Dan, but considering how much time she spent on set, under his supervision, it's hard not to wonder. And the fact that she legally can't speak about certain things, that just adds to the suspicion. It's heartbreaking because Jeanette has made it clear that she went through a lot at Nickelodeon. Her book, I'm Glad My Mom Died, hints at the toxic environment she was in. And while she never explicitly named Dan, she talked about the creator who manipulated her, pressured her to drink underage, and made her uncomfortable in so many ways.
Knew something was off.
Everything about Dan's behavior, from the creepy tweets to the questionable scenes in his shows, suggests that he had way too much control over these young actors. And when you see someone like Jeanette, who has clearly been deeply affected by her time there, it makes you wonder just how much worse things were behind the scenes. But now let's talk about Amanda Bynes' situation, which is very weird. She was one of the biggest Nickelodeon stars, and Dan had a lot of influence over her career. It's heartbreaking to think that when she was talking about her dad, she may have actually been referring to Dan. She's hinted at disturbing things happening to her, but like many others, she hasn't been able to speak openly about it. Before she was America's hilarious sweetheart, Amanda was a young kid performing at the Los Angeles Laugh Factory. It was there that Dan discovered her as a potential talent, and Amanda started appearing on All That before her own program, The Amanda Show, was launched. Dan saw her and immediately knew she would be a star. Director Virgil L. Fabian, who worked closely with Dan over the course of his golden years, said in ID's documentary series, "The Amanda Show aired for 3 successful seasons, but not everything was peachy between its star and showrunner. While no evidence of S relations was presented involving the executive, Dan was said to be overtly inappropriate with Amanda and additional on-set employees. For instance, All That Alum Leon Frierson recalled in ID's Quiet on Set that Dan insisted on using phallic-looking nose prosthetics, as well as skin-tight spandex costumes. The Amanda Show character Penelope Taint, who was brought to life by Amanda in sketches, was another example of a S innuendo, 2 writers claimed. According to the former employees of Dan's, the showrunner hid the character name from Nickelodeon and told them to remain tight-lipped about the subject. Further alarming interactions between a then-minor Amanda and Dan came to light after the fact. For instance, a video of bikini-clad Amanda as a child and Dan sitting in a hot tub alone recirculated on social media, as did photos of Amanda hugging him from behind.
Give me an IC. Can we have an IC before sent to the executive producer?
IC.
Though The Amanda Show was a huge success for the network, Dan and Amanda, the two parted ways and halted professional collaboration. The ID documentary series claimed that Amanda, who tried to become emancipated from her parents, was on the receiving end of Dan's help in her pursuits, but the legal battle fell through. Not only did Amanda remain under her parents' control, but her legal fight came amid Dan's second attempt at writing a children's program featuring her, What I Like About You. Dan eventually left the show's production, concluding their professional relationship. Though she enjoyed a fruitful career as a child actor, Amanda has struggled with her mental health for many years. She found herself back in the headlines in August 2013 after a string of substance A issues and mental health crises, and her mother was put in charge of her personal affairs and medical care. In 2022, Amanda, possibly spurred on by Britney Spears' success, petitioned to have her conservatorship dissolved. She was successful but was back in the public eye just 1 month later after experiencing a psychotic episode. She is pursuing her manicurist's license as of publication.
Amanda Bynes is officially no longer under a conservatorship. A judge terminated the agreement following the actress's petition to dissolve it with her parents' full support.
Dan has regularly maintained that there was no wrongdoing on his part during his time as a showrunner at Nickelodeon. Amid the flurry of accusations included in Quiet on Set, his team told Entertainment Weekly, Dan cared about the kids on his shows even when sometimes their own families unfortunately did not. He understood what they were going through, and he was their biggest champion. The fact is, many of the kids on these shows are put in the untenable position of becoming the breadwinner for their family and the pressure that comes along with that. Dan's statement continued. Add on top of that the difficulties of growing up and having to do so under the spotlight while working a demanding job, all as a child, the statement continued. That is why there are many levels of standards, executives, lawyers, teachers, and parents everywhere, all the time, on every set, every day. However, it is still a hard place to be a kid, and nobody knew that better than Dan. The network told In Touch in a statement ahead of Quiet on Set that though they can't corroborate or negate any of the allegations made, Nickelodeon, as a matter of policy, investigates all formal complaints as part of our commitment to fostering a safe and professional workplace environment free of harassment or other kinds of inappropriate conduct. Their statement to In Touch concluded, Our highest priorities are the well-being and best interests not just of our employees, casts, and crew, but of all children. And we have adopted numerous safeguards over the years to help ensure we are living up to our own high standards and the expectations of our audience. Another chief issue in the documentary is how Schneider repeatedly S kids, putting them in scenarios and making them do jokes that were completely inappropriate. Some of the examples it highlights include a scene in Zoe 101 when a tube of goo squirts all over Jamie Lynn Spears' face. We heard the boys saying, "It's a C-shot," says Alexa Nicholas, a fellow actor on the show. Back in the day, they were pretty close, and there have been a lot of wild rumors about what really went down when Jamie Lynn got pregnant during Zoe 101. She was super young at the time. This was back in 2008, and some people believe that Dan Schneider, the producer and director of the show, was actually the father of her baby. That's supposedly why the show got canceled.
I look back and I think, wow, how is this acceptable?
Now, officially, the father of her daughter, Maddie, is Casey Aldridge. But Star Magazine once claimed that Casey wasn't really involved, and there's speculation that he was just paid off to pretend to be the dad while Dan Schneider quietly slipped away from the whole situation. People have even put side-by-side pictures of Maddie and Dan, pointing out similarities. It's all just rumors, but the idea that Dan Schneider could be the real father has definitely made people raise some eyebrows over the years. Jamie Lynn's family insists that Casey was around and that he was actually being flown out to the Zoe 101 set to hang out with her. But let's be real, dude was still in high school at the time, so that whole situation was kinda weird. Now, something definitely went down on the set of Zoe 101 because former cast members have spoken out about it. One of the biggest voices, Alexa Nicholas.
Zoe 101 was 100% my breakout role.
If you don't remember, Alexa was a huge part of the original show. She's the girl you see standing to the left of Jamie Lynn in old cast photos. But fast forward to today, and Zoe 101 just got a reboot. And guess who's missing? Yep, Alexa wasn't invited back. So why was she left out? Well, there's actually a very good reason, and she didn't hold back when she spoke on it. It all started when she posted a throwback pic and wrote, "That one time I was taught by a network studio to be boy crazy at 12 years old. Ladies, don't be boy crazy. Instead, be you crazy and build your own empire. Kids networks need to stop S children. It's creepy." Alexa definitely had some experiences with Dan Schneider, and she knows exactly what went down behind the scenes. When the Zoe 101 reboot was announced, it brought back a lot of emotions for her. So much so that she went off and shared her thoughts in a whole Instagram story. She didn't hold back either. The reboot wasn't just some nostalgic moment for her. It was a trigger, bringing up all the messed up stuff she went through back in the day.
I shouldn't be crying because I'm an adult, and those things were so long ago. I guess it just brought up old memories, and it's just sad. I don't get it.
A lot of people definitely believe that Alexa Nicholas went through something on that Zoe 101 set. And honestly, she's probably not the only one. There's speculation that Jamie Lynn went through something too, but unlike Alexa, she's never going to talk about it. And let's be real, it's probably because of some NDA or the power Dan Schneider still has over these people.
Entertainment industry is not the only industry that punishes people for coming forward about a toxic work environment in the workplace.
And that's the real issue here. Survivors and victims are scared to speak out because they know there could be serious consequences. It's a messed up cycle where powerful people get away with things because they silence the ones who know the truth. And that's exactly why things need to change in our society. No one should be forced into silence just because someone with influence doesn't want the truth to come out. In addition to putting child actors in uncomfortable situations, these scenes also exposed millions of kids who watched them to S scenarios and innuendos in a problematic way. This is a show for kids, so who is S innuendo for on a kids show? Asked Sketchy, a former BuzzFeed news culture writer and consultant for the docuseries. Schneider has said that executives at the company broadly approve these scenes and that he'd be open to removing offensive ones from streaming versions. Notably, quiet on set raises issues that have plagued the industry for some time. While Nickelodeon is its focal point, the problems it describes are far from limited to one network. I know a lot of kids that grew up in the industry. Evan Rachel Wood, a former child actor, says in a 2020 documentary called Showbiz Kids. And what surprised me when I got older was finding out that pretty much all of the young men were A in some way S. It turns out that, before the announcement about his separation, Viacom-CBS, the parent company of Nickelodeon, had investigated Schneider and found that alongside the many coworkers who praised his attention to detail and work ethic, many people he worked with viewed him as verbally a-sieve. Schneider, in his first major interview since the split with Nickelodeon, declined to comment on the investigation. But he defended his leadership style, denied he left on bad terms, and described his departure as a natural confluence of events after an exhausting period in which he delivered as many as 50 episodes of shows each year. "I took a break to take care of a lot of stuff that I'd let go by the wayside for decades," Schneider said, noting that he lost more than 100 pounds during his time off. "Whatever I do next, I want it to outdo what I've done in the past." The Viacom review came amid internet chatter that trafficked in innuendo about the appropriateness of Schneider's presence in the world of children's entertainment. Online denizens posted compilations that stitched together scenes from Schneider's shows, videos he has taken on set, and pictures of him with child actors to raise questions about his behavior with the young people he worked with. Shots in the shows of bare feet were presented as evidence of a fetish. Other scenes were dissected and discussed as scripted moments of wink-wink SL innuendo, acted out by a teenage cast. Schneider said he was well aware of the postings, which he described as ridiculous. He said it was sad that social media companies can freely push forward any lie. "Kids find feet goofy and funny," he said, and there was no effort to S his young stars. That's it for today. See you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.